Sorry, we got to stop. We are going live in just a second. And we can have some conversation. There was some interest in if anyone has any questions about what's going on. If we want to talk about that, we can absolutely do that. We are live on YouTube now. Hello, everyone on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Our Wednesday class that's new has actually gotten like 40 views on each of the videos. So maybe titling, maybe who knows, maybe people who come here just want to hear about Kohelet. I'm not sure, but these also do pretty good. So we're glad to have anyone out there join us. And just wanted to start with before we went into Talmud, if there's anything that we had questions about in the world or that this group sometimes discusses. I wanted to be able to give you some good information, especially in a world that's filled with bad information.
I'm not yet understanding how we're going to make the Straits of Hormuz safe for tankers.
There's some understanding that that just like when Joe Biden was president, there was an effort by the U.S. Navy to guide ships through the Gulf of Aden, or the area south of the canal, where the Houthis were where the Houthis were causing a lot of trouble and threatening to block all shipping. And so at that point, the U.S. Navy made it possible for ships to continue to go through, even with the
as
threats
well
of
as
the
the
Houthis.
Danish Navy. Which
Fair
I don't
enough.
think it's going to
Presumably
join.
they carry a lot of anti-ballistic missiles and anti-drone equipment to protect the
What?
tanker.
Sorry?
Well, a tanker is totally vulnerable. And so
Well, sure, yeah, that's why you need a Navy ship, because it has it has the ability to shoot down any missiles. The problem is, as the president pointed out, I think yesterday, the problem at the moment is, just like the Houthis, it doesn't take a huge technologically advanced nation to block shipping over a small body of water. It actually takes. It's really easy to have many different points that are hard to find that would launch these things. And so it will take the US, we got to scour intelligence and satellite photography and all kinds of things to find where all these various areas where there are drone and mine and other small arms platforms that they're using to cause trouble. It's going to take a little bit of time to find all of them. It's not that we can't beat it. It's just that it's very dispersed and relatively low tech. So
I think the assumption has been for so many years that it would be mined, and that's not what they're doing.
It's not about what they may have lost the capacity. It's not about. I wouldn't say it's about what they are or aren't doing. Because I'm not sure we know what
the
Iran
Chinese
can do
are
or not do.
passing through, and if there are mines, they wouldn't be able to pass. So it's
No, they're right. No, they're not. There aren't mines.
Yeah.
The question is, did they choose not to lay them, or did they lose the capacity to lay them because of our strikes before they were able to? There was some report actually last week that they had laid about 13 mines, but that's all that they apparently were able to finish before we finished with them. So it may actually be, I tend to believe that what it is that they would have laid as many mines as they could have, but that they lost the capacity, or at least they're saving some small remaining capacity, which is very much their strategy in all things, including with the missiles. They're saving some of their remaining inventory so as to stretch it out over a longer term and maybe save some of it for the future. Now, if we blow all of it up, then they won't be able to do that.
Can it be that Iran is an ally of China and
Yeah,
might
of
be
course.
running the ships through for China, and we're not going to interfere with that?
You're saying, could China be bringing weapons to? Is that what you're asking?
China's making oil.
Oh yeah,
Iran's making more money right
Yes.
now than they were before the war.
Well, it's because the price of a barrel is up.
Because China's
what they
so
make
that's why I
is
don't think they were gonna
part, and this is part of why CARB just got hit, and the Marines may indeed take it. At that point, Iran would have no ability to sell any oil to anyone. since their port for
Right.
exporting it is
But I
all
don't-
out of this island. So
I don't think China's gonna let us do that.
what?
I don't think China will let us do that.
I don't know what you mean by won't let us.
They will, I.
How would they
China
stop
said,
us?
We will cut off all.
What?
Well,
What could they cut off?
The, rare earth, processed rare earth.
Only from their country.
95%.
Yeah, but
97% of what we use is rare earth minerals that they have processed.
yeah,
Rare
because it's
earth
the
minerals
cheapest.
aren't
But we
rare,
could,
but
first
the
of all,
processing-
we can get, there's a lot, first of all, there's a lot of that stuff that we can get elsewhere. We get it from them because it's the cheapest. We could get it elsewhere if we needed to source it from
It's the
elsewhere. And the refined element of the end product, first of all, my understanding is we get most of ours from Taiwan, not from China.
the chips, but the refining of the rare earths itself is done in China.
But again, we could set up an alternative to that.
It would take a few years, but we could.
Well,
well, it is.
they can do what they want, but if they do that, then believe me, we'll do something else. And they will again, it's like if they do that, believe me, that will cause a greater response than they are perhaps willing to endure. It could involve also a lot of sanctions that have never been put on China, that would totally, utterly destroy their economy and possibly lead to look, I do believe, and this is online, so who knows what anyone will see and hear and think of it, but I do think that what the administration is trying to do is play grand strategy while weakening these other powers without angering them to the point of to the point of their own collapse, without agitating them to the point of their own collapse. That means both Russia and China. Part of why the India is allowed to buy oil from buy Russian oil, not Iranian oil. The Trump administration, I don't think wants China or Russia to fall, at least not yet. There's a managed instability in the world at the moment. We're turning nations over. We're turning geopolitical chess pieces. This is what they mean by grand strategy. And so there's some amount of placating of China and Russia that will be done, but with the understanding that we are turning these dominoes over. And quite frankly, Russia and China, it appears, are taking what they can get. They'll take their oil and whatnot, or Russia will take their being able to sell their oil, and China will take being able to buy it. And none of them are really in any position to threaten anything more than that. They're really not in a position to threaten to cut us off from anything, because if they want to go to the walls, I think our allies are still going to be there for us. And it would totally backfire on China. Russia doesn't have any allies outside in the West, so they're a lot easier to manage, I would think. But it seems like Trump is moving towards making sure that the oil that's exported by Iran, how it is exported and to whom, will be controlled by the United States. That's probably the minimum victory condition for Trump in this conflict.
We knocked out their ability to ship oil by that strike in their shipping section.
Yeah, it could be fixed. I mean, like, it's not, I mean, we didn't, we're trying to damage their ability to some extent, but Trump also got angry with the Israelis for doing too much damage to the oil production infrastructure, because again, we have to manage all of it, because if it looks like there's going to be like there are so many concerns that are going on, and I would love if we could only win on everything all the time. But it seems like we have to manage a little bit so that we can win the greater battles with Venezuela, with Cuba, with Iran. And then when these chess pieces have folded over, the goal is not, in the Trump administration's view, I don't think, to get rid of China or Russia, but merely for them to know that they can't wage war on our allies.
I,
And that's really the whole strategy. The whole strategy is just to avoid a world war next year, because there was supposed to be a world war in 2027, according to people a decade ago.
that's very hopeful. If that were true, I'd be supporting it, but I don't believe that that's what Trump is after. But
Okay, I think he is, and I think, as is usual, Trump doesn't tell you what Trump is after when it comes to these things, which tends to work a little bit. I mean, some of it has worked.
You have information.
He also does a lot of crazy stuff, like with Greenland, which I don't even begin to understand. Though some people say that's part of grand strategy too. Yeah,
You have connections within Israel.
sure.
Are they comfortable with what's going on?
I love how you put that. I have connections within Israel.
Well,
It's
you
like-
have friends.
yeah, I have friends and family who live. Yeah. Are you asking about what's going on in Israel and just?
Are they comfortable with the way things are going?
I think Israelis are incredibly resilient people, probably the most resilient
They
on
have
earth.
to be.
Israelis have been running to bomb shelters every night since this conflict began, and this is obviously just the continuation of the conflict that began on October 7th. So I think they're all generally supportive of this because they're very hopeful people, like I'm expressing very hopeful aspirations, as Roger said. And their hope is that this will mean that the regime will fall, which would mean they won't have to do this anymore. They want a world of peace where there's no war with Hamas, there's no war with Lebanon and Hezbollah, there's no war with Iran, and nobody ever has to hear a siren go off anymore. But if they're going to go off, they'd rather fight the battle and win it. So they're supportive of this. And they want to win. I mean, obviously, if the conflict ends and nothing has materially changed except the first name of the dictator, then that might be a question of, then there might be, I don't know, there could be some political blowback. Is the thing is, there have been very few casualties. So I mean, every single one is a tragedy, obviously, but like, it's for years they said war with Iran would mean tens of thousands of casualties. That has not been the case.
I agree with it, but
Yeah.
you know what the real casualty in Israel is right now? At least what I hear
Okay.
is the call up of 100,000 reservists who are exhausted from
True.
3 years of war.
True.
And the reserves have never been through anything like this.
You're right. You're absolutely right. That's a very good
That's
point.
where there's some.
You told me.
There is a lot of, you're right that there is, and by the way, should this level of conflict even go on for a much longer period of time, that will start to cause strain, especially as Roger pointed out, a lot more reservists have again been called up when they've already done, many of them, hundreds and hundreds of days of reserve duty, which is far more than has ever been expected, since this is, by many orders of magnitude, the longest war Israel has ever fought. The longest one before this was less than a month, and then this has been going on now for 3 years, so almost. So
I read somewhere this morning that Israel is threatening Lebanon, saying if they don't disarm Hezbollah, Israel will invade Lebanon. And I don't know
That's what those reservists who were called up
That's
for.
why. Okay.
right, yeah. So the problem is Hezbollah is getting active. They see it as kind of like, if they don't show up now, to be fair, that would have been their shame forever, right? Like I personally think they should disband, and because they suck. But like, for them, it would be the ultimate shame if they were created essentially to be Iran's proxy army and spent decades as this feared proxy army, only for the war to finally come and for them to literally do nothing and sit there and lick their wounds from a year and a half ago. So finally, they kind of got involved and they started shooting a bunch of rockets, which Israel is not willing to tolerate because they cannot have an empty north anymore. So they've immediately gone up and seized up to and just north of the Litani River again, which again they needed reservists to do because the standing army of Israel, especially with all the operations this is the other unsaid part, all the operations in the West Bank that are necessary, both the ones that are necessary and the ones that are bad. I mean, there are some that aren't that I think are probably, where they're just like defending settlers who are being unreasonable about stuff. But most of what they're doing there is very necessary in disarming or seizing guns that have been shipped in across the border with Jordan into the cities like Nablus, Shechem, and Jenin, and these places in the northern West Bank. So this is a front of the war that very few people outside of Israel have even speak about. It doesn't even come up on the weirdest part is, again, because this is mostly it's partially Hamas and it's partially other smaller armed groups and whatnot in the West Bank. Even Hamas's mouthpieces in the West don't really talk that much about what's happening in the West Bank. They're really focused on their manufactured story about Gaza. And Gaza is Hamas, so they care about that. They have Hamas. It's interesting because they don't hold the West Bank. They have slightly less of a state mentality about the West Bank. It's just it's theirs the way Palestine is theirs because all of it is theirs. Not that there's some specialness to the West Bank that doesn't exist about, not the specialness of God, anyway. So what was I talking about? Was I saying anything in particular?
Reservists in Lebanon.
Anyway, so they're going to go to Lebanon, and they're going to if they can't, and recently even Lebanon, the state of Lebanon, this is the first time ever Lebanon said they want to have direct negotiations with Israel, and everyone was like, "Oh, isn't that great? They want to have direct negotiations with Israel." And Israel, I think rightly, in my view, said, "What is Lebanon? What good are direct negotiations with Lebanon if Lebanon doesn't secure Lebanon?"
It doesn't have the power to secure Lebanon.
Right. Well, but they have guns. When you say they don't have the power, you mean they don't have the will to actually do a battle with. They would have to take their small arms and risk losing in a fight with Hezbollah.
Well,
but they'd have to be willing to fight that battle, which they've never been. They've never been willing to fight Hezbollah, and that's the biggest problem. It's not that they have no legitimacy because they're not in the end, the buck stops with Hezbollah, is the way Israel sees it in Lebanon. Lebanon doesn't have any authority over Lebanon, at least unless except what Hezbollah allows for them to have. And so that holds no interest with Israel. They're like, "What, you want to negotiate with us? You're not gonna do the job. They're still gonna have the rockets and the guns." And all that. You're not going to do it. You haven't done it in the last few years since we made the last agreement that caused the ceasefire. And the Lebanese army was supposed to disarm Hezbollah, which we all knew they weren't going to do, but they said they were gonna. And the president made a big speech about how all the control of arms has to be in the sovereign domain of the state. And then he didn't do anything. I'm sorry. A couple of Hezbollah was like, "Oh yeah, there's some broken stuff over there." And the Lebanese army went and said, "Great, we'll grab that." And, "Oh, look, everyone, look, we seized all these broken assault rifles and exploded ammunition stores. And, oh, isn't this great that we did this?" And the world was like, "Yes, yes, yes. Good job, Lebanon." The UN was like, "Yes, yes, you are truly the peacemakers of our time." And Israel said, "What about all the rockets and all the strongholds? Are you going to go there and get their guns?" And the Lebanese army said, "No, no, 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 no. We did it already. We've done what we're going to do."
So Israel's going to go in and clear that out.
So as long as this persists, the threat to Hezbollah is if they let it go, if they go on too long. Really, what Israel's doing is merely designed to, I think, to stop the rocket fire. It's to stop the rocket fire.
In the north again.
Right. Well, they are living. They haven't evacuated the north. They're just trying to defend. They're just, they just want the rocket fire to stop. If Hezbollah stopped, they would probably stop advancing. They're not trying to fight. But the idea is, the threat is that if you keep firing rockets, we will eventually start taking over your, killing, doing airstrikes and taking over strongholds and stuff. And that will obviously, that could be bad for you, especially if we get the bulldozers in and just knock everything down. then they can't go back and live there, which would make it hard for that. Because again, remember that every town in south of the Litani is a military base. Because for Hezbollah, military bases, it's kind of like, this might be weird to you. Anybody watch Star Trek: The Next Generation here? Is anyone familiar with it? On this show, there's a ship in space. Okay, Star Trek. You get what Star Trek. Internet might know what Star Trek is. Okay, there's a show. There's a ship, and they live in space. And unlike the first one, I actually don't know because I didn't really watch the first one that much. But unlike the first one, I think it's not just people who signed up to have a badge on their chest who live on this ship. They have families and barbers and teachers, and it's a whole community. And there's an episode, I don't remember how far into the show it is, but I think they're like fighting with the Ferengi or whatever, or some minor villain. And the villain says, how cruel it is that you, like they're like going to take the ship and stuff. And they're like, well, you can't do that. We have children on board. And they're like, what's wrong with you that you have children on board this ship that's going to be fighting with people and whatnot? Right? And I was actually, you think about that and you go, probably a good point. It probably was a silly idea and put people at risk to make your flagship full of children and teachers and stuff, and not just people who had signed up to be a part of your Space Navy or whatever we want to call it. But you know, if you signed up to be in the Space Navy, you get to be on the big ship. If you didn't, it seems a little weird that you're there. Now, to be fair, we have military bases mostly that have people living on them, right?
And
it's not
children.
And children and teachers and all that stuff. It's not out of the conception. But when the media talks about these places, they don't call them military bases. They say this town that Israel struck in South Lebanon. But it's not a town. It's a military base. I'm not saying that they can't strike our military bases if we're at war. I wish them to fail in every instance, but I'm not saying that's war. But the problem is it's an asymmetrical war because we're fighting an equal war, but they say but the stochastic war, the war of concepts has us bombing towns and them shooting missiles at military bases. Well, first of all, our frontline military bases don't have any families. First off, let's be very clear. And second, it's a military base. It has to be fair game. Otherwise, we can't ever win. We can only lose. And I think most people in the West, I get none of them work for NPR or the New York Times or the Washington Post, but most people in the West would rather win wars than lose them. And the media has set it up so we can only lose. Right? I mean, that's how I see it. So, hooray! In any event, I do think that things are going pretty good. When you look at the Gulf War, or even the invasion of the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq were both pretty fairly seamless. Most people just ran away, I think. But the first Gulf War had a lot more casualties than this in a little bit longer time frame. But I think by the end of it, it'll be a similar couple of months. I think it'll probably last about 2 months. And then either the regime will fall or Israel and America will have accomplished enough of our goals to say we created the conditions for the regime to fall. And now if the people, there are no more police stations and no more places, no more interrogation prisons and no more, like we blew up all these places. So if they want to go and do their thing now, it'll be up to them to do so.
I think those conditions existed before. That's my problem. I think this regime was on its way out. Maybe not on the timetable that Netanyahu needs for the October election.
No. I disagree that this government was on its way out because of the protest last month. They successfully put down the protest last month.
Yeah, but it was starting to build up again.
There were some protests, but again, I think it was building up because here's the other thing. As I pointed out in other instances, there is some reporting that in the past, the plan was to have this war happen in June. And there was supposed to be a ramp up. There was supposed to be gathering allies. There was supposed to be a joint international mission to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. All of this is now like he's trying to do it now after the war started. You see it in the messaging. But all of this was supposed to be built up ahead of the war. And all that moved the war up was the opportunity to know they could get Khomeini because they weren't fully in position yet. And Khomeini thought they wouldn't do it. And Israel said, we can do it. And Trump said, okay, let's go and let's do it. But that made the war start 4 months earlier than it was supposed to start. And that means there's a lot of preparation that the United States was preparing to do, both militarily and diplomatically, that they didn't engage in, that they didn't have the time to engage in, and they didn't really, they may not have had the professionalism to accomplish. I don't know any of the answers to any of. Would it have been successful? I'm not sure. But there was theoretically, we've heard from reporting after the fact, that there was a plan to make this work out for a later time frame. And the protests moved up the time frame because Trump said during the protests, they didn't anticipate the protests is the thing. The protests were not anticipated by Israel and America.
It's just a little aside, but I heard the rabbi being interviewed on NPR. Forgive me for this.
No, sure. Again, it's fine, NPR.
But he was explaining that Khomeini is modern Farsi for Haman.
Well,
I don't think
not interesting.
I haven't heard that. Maybe that rabbi was speaking more metaphorically, like it's like, it's like that name has
the time of Purim.
right, yes. Well, we were all very Purimistic when the war started, like the day like 2 days before Purim. But yeah, no, I don't. That's not my understanding. I mean, it does sound a little similar, but I'm not an expert on Farsi, so if it is, then it could be, and the internet can drag me because I don't know Farsi, but maybe it is. I hadn't heard anyone else say that, but I don't know Farsi, and if they really wanted to make Haman the leader of Persia, that seems like a really interesting choice for them to make. Good for them, I guess. It's like.
Oh, we need to elect Mordecai as prime minister.
It's just like that's the weird thing. It's like why would you name yourself after losers? Like who names themselves after people who like it's like that guy, did they not read the end of the story? It doesn't go well for him. Like we don't name our we don't well that's not really true. We also name our kids sometimes. Do we name our kids after people who lose?
Robert E.
Of course it's our
No, not our kids, Jewish kids, not Robert. Also, do people don't name their kids after Robert E. Lee? I mean, you name your kid Robert, you didn't name them after Robert E. Lee. Like, nobody names their kids after Robert E. Lee. I don't think so.
Just universities.
Well, I mean, he gave a bunch of money to that. Didn't they rename it anyway? Washington Lee, isn't it?
I think
William
so.
and Mary now.
It is, but it's
Washington Lee
be
used to be.
reverting back.
I don't think so. I think we're okay. I mean, like, who knows? Everyone's got their thing about everyone. I've never lived in the South, so I don't know if that's like a real cult of personality. Haman the Second Coming.
Yeah.
That would be so unfortunate for the Christians if the second coming that came first was Haman's. Damn, wait, does that mean we're gonna have to wait? They're like, that means only 260 years until right? They're like, it must be on a recurring basis. And once you've hit your number of years, whoop. No, I don't know. I'm blaspheming a whole nother billion people on the internet. Fun times. But yeah, so just a word while we're on the internet about what happened in Michigan. Temple Israel is a place that has trained many, many Reform rabbis. It's a place that's important to Reform Judaism in America. I say this because whenever a Chabad is attacked, I can't think of any way to say this, but the most direct way. No Jew should ever be attacked. But when a Chabad is attacked, people say, go to your Chabad. Chabad loves the Jews. Give money to your Chabad. When a Reform shul is attacked, people say, the Jews are under attack. Well, our Reform nature gets washed out. Nobody's interested in our particular brand the way they are when it's an Orthodox Jew who gets attacked or a Chabad Jew who gets attacked. They get labels. They get the ability to be noted for their contributions to the Jewish people and why it's so important to protect them. I note that the same people who say those things say different things when it's a Reform shul that's burned down in Mississippi or a Reform shul that's attacked in Michigan. They have or a conservative shul in Pittsburgh. By the way,
Was Tree of Life conservative?
yes, Tree of Life was conservative. So is conservative. I shouldn't say was. I'm not saying it's certainly not about money or attention, but what it is about is respect. And this is part of the fight we have for respect within the Jewish world that we're still fighting on this Overton window today about who is Jewish, about who gets to speak for Judaism, and who is on the front lines of confronting anti-Jewish hatred in the world. And the truth is, many of us are. Chabad is, and so are we. Because for every post that's like, ooh, Chabad has an outpost everywhere, we beat them to a lot of places. We uphold Judaism in the periphery of communities across the West and in South America. And I think it's worth noting that means we are just as likely, if not more so, to be attacked than any Orthodox Jew, and not on the individual level on the street in New York, but on the communal level. And so we all need to stand together, and that means we also need to all note our particularism and how it's important and how each of them needs to be respected. Not just Jewish particularism over universalism, but particularism within Jewish communities ourselves. Okay, well, I said that now, and at least it's on the internet for anyone who wants to see it. I don't think anyone will. I think I probably scared people away with all my yelling about Trump being right about military stuff. Who knows? We'll see if he's right. The truth is, it's hard to tell until these things are over. Who knows what exactly is true? Have there been any planes shot down? Only the ones that Kuwait shot down on the first day. Have U.S. service members died? Yes, sadly, something like 13, both in essentially two incidents. One was the crashing of a plane, which is tragic, and the other was a missile or a drone hitting a building on the very opening moments of the conflict. And that was obviously a mistake in air defenses not being able to take it down. But beyond that, things have been relatively good, and we pray that U.S. forces should do well and be healthy. And also for our allies, the Israeli forces should also do well and be healthy. Anyone else have anything they want to contribute? No? Okay. Well, I did promise we would talk a little Talmud, and so indeed we shall as part of Talmud class. With so much going on in the world, I understand the need to have some kind of clearinghouse for ideas and to understand current events. I think that's important, and there's machloket l'shem shamayim here too. Roger and I had some of it today. Roger's filling in for Harold, who usually serves as my liberal foil. My NPR lightning rod, who can help focus my words and my ire when necessary. But it's not directed at you; it's directed at the NPR. I pointed like that, like I was pointing at Sam, but I'm not pointing at Sam.
Well, and then I heard NPR the other morning say that Bet Shemesh was just outside Tel Aviv.
Right, it's like, is it though? Did you get one of those AI maps that puts things in the wrong, locations in the wrong place? Crazy. Anyway, yeah, it's like, I guess in the sense that Houston is just outside Dallas. It's like, yeah, I mean, kind of on the very large scale. Anyway. Yeah, right. It's only a couple hours. It's not that it's that far in Israel because nothing is real. Not that much is that. Yeah, go for it. Go for it. You're all right. Let's see, I'm looking for a good place for us to start in the. I don't want to talk about a Nazarite. Oh, that's right. You guys in here, nobody on the internet can see this yet, but the people in the room can see what I'm looking at on the computer. This is a fun story. We'll do this one. And we read about this. We might have read beyond this, and we might have read a little before this, where it's returning to it. But we'll talk a little bit about here. Let me put it because people online can't see it. They just see me and Lauren at the moment. My hair's a little messed up, so. Okay, so here we are in Brachot 20a. And the Gemara is gonna, right, we're gonna say, let us derive from something from this. We're gonna ligmar mina, and we're gonna let us derive, and we're still talking about this general principle that human dignity takes precedence over all mitzvot in the Torah. Right? And we gotta know what that means. We've got to know what circumstances, what's going on. So let us take it from this. And of course, this case is something about a Nazarite and becoming ritually impure from burial. Burial cause it, right? Because like Kohanim, Nazarites aren't supposed to deal with dead bodies. So it's like, well, what if their parent or their brother or their sister dies or something? They're like, a parent, obviously they can go and not become impure. They say also, a sister, okay, let's say yeah. And they say, okay, let's take from this, let's try and remember, they've been looking for a proof text. It's an answer in search of a proof text for us, right? Right? They want to prove this general principle that human dignity takes precedence over the mitzvot. Or in this case, it might be more of an example of human dignity influencing the implementation of the mitzvot. But in any event, let's use that and let's talk about it. Is what the Gemara suggests. And then they're going to immediately say, we probably shouldn't do that, right? And they're going to say, this is a special case because of Shev ve'al ta'aseh shaneh. Right. So because a case of Shev ve'al ta'aseh, which again, term of art here, sit and refrain from action is different. So engaging in the burial of a mitzvah, so doing a required, like being a part of this because it's your required duty to do it, is not actually in contravention of a mitzvah. Rather, by doing so, he becomes ritually impure and is then rendered incapable of fulfilling that mitzvah. We cannot derive a general principle from here that human dignity would also override a Torah prohibition in a case where that prohibition is directly contravened. So it doesn't work in this instance. But we've still got this question and we're still searching how we can talk about it. So the Gemara responds, in the context of the discussion of whether or not human dignity overrides honoring God in the sense of fulfilling his mitzvot, God's mitzvot, Rav Papa said to Abaye, what is different about the earlier, the Mitrache, sorry, uh, the generations that came before us, um, for whom miracles occurred, and what is different about us, for whom miracles do not occur. If it is because of Torah study, right, and he's going to suggest a reason perhaps. In the years of Rav Yehuda, all of their learning was confined to the order of Nezikin, right? Because they hadn't done that. There wasn't that much material back in the original days, but in the days of the Mishnah. But he says, but for us, Rav Papa is a Babylonian rabbi. It's much later. He says, but for us, we learn all 6 orders, right? We know we've got the full thing now. Moreover, when Rav Yehuda would reach in Tractate Okatzin, which discusses the extent to which the stems of various fruits and vegetables are considered an integral part of the produce in terms of becoming ritually impure, the halacha that a woman who pickles vegetables in a pot, and some say when he would reach the halacha that olives pickled with their leaves are pure, because after pickling, it is no longer possible to lift the fruit by its leaves. They are no longer considered part of the fruit. He would find it difficult to understand. Right? So he would look in this one tractate, but he wouldn't be able to get the real answer because he doesn't have the answer yet. It came after him. Right? It's easy for us to see the conversation between all these rabbis over time. Harder if you're living before the conversation is finished. Now, what's interesting about this? He's asking about miracles, right? What's interesting about this? The time of miracles, right? What is different about the earlier generations for whom miracles occurred? What's interesting to you, I'll give you, I won't just keep shouting at you. I'll wait to see what we can manage.
Well, there was a time of miracles and a time of prophets, and it seems to me they're quite a bit before us.
Before us, but also before him, right? The most interesting, he refers back to the time to when miracles occurred. He's not talking about Moses.
Yeah,
he's not talking about the prophets or the kings. He's talking about earlier rabbis. Not really that much earlier, right? Only a couple hundred years for him. He's not talking about 1,500 years ago, like it's Moshe, or it's not like he's not talking about the splitting of the sea. He would say, those are the disputes between Rav and Shmuel that we see here, and we, in contrast, learn 13 versions of Okatzin. While, with regard to miracles, after declaring a fast to pray for a drought to end, when Rav Yehuda would remove one of his shoes, the rain would immediately fall, whereas we torment ourselves and cry out and no one notices us. Right? The rabbis will read this in another part much later, but the rabbis will have rules for how to institute fasts for when there's a drought or something, and there's different. First, we close up shops, and then we don't allow communal bathing, and then we don't allow there are levels of what you, and then you at the top of it. One of the top things is you declare this big communal fast, so that just for penitence to get relief, so that God will take notice of you. Of course, he's saying, okay, well, they would, he's saying, first of all, they would know, right? You're saying they wouldn't know because they hadn't read it. They would come up with it if it was a problem. They would think of it and the answer would occur to them. And also, they could take off their shoe and rain would come. I mean, that's hard for us to understand because it's like, how do you explain miracle? Right. It's like, I can't explain it. That's just what it's saying happens. But, he's saying, but he's saying Rav Yehuda, does his own thing, has his own set of rules, it seems. Abaye said to Rav Papa, the previous generations that he's referring to were wholly dedicated to the sanctification of God's name, while we are not as dedicated to the sanctification of God's name. Akdushat Hashem, it says. Akdushat Hashem. We are, or the sanctification of God's name. So then we're going to get a story showing us that the previous generations were in fact more committed. So rather than denying, I went one angle and I just denied that there was this guy comes up and he says, there's a reason. The reason is we're just not as, right? There's some level of inner piety kind of that we used to have. And when we did, we were more in tune with God, I guess is what he's saying. That when that happened, miracles happened. But now, not so much. Which only proves that we've been being told that this generation will ruin us all for at least 2,000 years. Because here we're told that this generation has no Kiddushat Hashem. Whereas, I think if Rav Papa and Abaye came, if Abaye came and saw this generation, he'd probably be fine with his. Maybe not. Maybe he'd prefer it. I don't know.
It's like I used to walk to school 5 miles in the snow.
Yes, it's like that.
Uphill both ways.
Yes, it's like that. And he's saying, yes. The reason, and of course that you can tell from talking about it, that's not the answer, right? That can't be the answer, but it's a good answer. I mean, again, this is a story, we're getting a story. Take from it, there are a lot of different things you can take from it, including what we are. So the typical of the earlier generation's commitment, the Gemara relates, there was this incident, this one story involving Rav Ada bar Ahava, who saw a non-Jewish woman who was wearing a garment made of a forbidden mixture of wool and linen in the marketplace, right? You're not supposed to wear these karbaltas. You're not supposed to wear it's a Torah prohibition to mix wool and linen.
Why?
It's in the Torah. You don't ask me why. No, I'm just kidding. The Torah says why. It says you should be. The answer essentially is God is very interested in the Torah in setting up the Jewish people as a people that aren't a compromise or a hybrid. Not about ethnicity, but in how they carry themselves. They don't hedge in their gods. They don't hedge in their attitudes. They don't hedge in their respect for their communities and their parents and all these things that are required by God. And they don't hedge in their clothes even these things. They're a nation of priests. And as a holy nation, one sec, I don't think we're expecting anybody, but okay. But there's this part of holiness is this purity. This idea that it should not that okay, it can be wool or it can be cotton. It's not that one is better than the other necessarily, but it's not in this case wool, and there are different ones that are listed, and you're not supposed to mix them. And if you wear a garment of these multiple things, you're supposed to die. Now we don't really put people to death for this, or we don't. We certainly don't.
So it's the search for purity, and if you had purity, we'd have more miracles.
Maybe so. Maybe so. That is an interesting conclusion. An interesting conclusion. Not. Don't let the internet hear that though. They'll be like, Sometimes, again, people take this to a greater and lesser thing. But Judaism keeps trying to teach that just because something is apart doesn't mean that it's better or worse, but it can be evaluated for what it is on its own. That's helpful for God, especially with the Jewish people, because God wants people to look at us. Not necessarily the way they're looking at us today. Right, but God wants the people to look at us and to learn from us, to take from us the lessons on how to live life that we are put here to teach. Essentially. So, part of this purity is exemplified in clothes. We know God cares about clothes because he gives us all the instructions for the priestly garments and the ephod and with the gems and and we hear about all the linens. God is a big interior design, big on design aesthetics. God is got lots of thoughts on design. Design the tabernacle, got lots of thoughts on how design the ark, has big thoughts on God, maybe an engineer of sorts, has a lot of thoughts on engineering and design and such, but could have had a show on HGTV if God wanted, but obviously more important things to do than an HGTV show. But in any event, this is just one of the rules, and it's a rule that's there to show our apartness, and that's its specific purpose. So you ask why, and that's the answer as to why. That's why the Torah says it. They're just doing it because the Torah says it. They're just saying this is a rule. You're not supposed to do this because the Torah says. Since he thought she was Jewish, and again, if you're not Jewish, but he thought she was Jewish. Since he thought that she was Jewish, he stood and ripped it from her. It was then divulged that she was not Jewish, a non-Jew, and he was taken to court due to the shame that he caused her. And they assessed the payment for the shame that he caused her at 400 zuz. I almost have to stop here and make a point of saying, first of all, here we have recorded in the Talmud. I hear a lot of times, especially on the internet, about the Talmud and what things the Talmud says about Jews and non-Jews. I hear a lot about what people think the Talmud says about Jews and non-Jews. Well, here we have the Talmud saying what it thinks about Jews and non-Jews. And it has a Jew who mistakenly thought, first of all, I would also like as a modern person if it said, and he shouldn't have done that to that woman, but that's not relevant to this particular moment. He goes up to her, but she's not Jewish, and he essentially assaults her. A non-Jewish woman who doesn't have the rule, the Jewish rule to follow. She's not bound by halacha. We don't believe that other people should be forced to follow our religious diktats. And so he gets taken to a Jewish court. And the Jewish court fines the Jewish man 400 zuz. That's twice a woman, right? No. How much is a ketubah? I should know this, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
How many shekels to a zun?
Yeah, I was right. It's 200 zuz. Is a 200 zuz. I think the exchange rate is like 4 zuz to a shekel. I think it's something like that, but it's 200 zuz for a ketubah. So he has to pay double her ketubah, not her, she's not Jewish, but like double the rate of a Jewish woman's ketubah as penalty for his. That's like, again, a ketubah is like dower, right? It's in a way, it's not an insignificant amount of money. So this is the case of a Jew who assaults a non-Jew and a Jewish court heavily penalizing him for having done so, which is good and proper. But I get told all the time, especially on the internet, and since we're there, I want to make special note that I keep getting told that the Talmud is full of ways for the Jews to do things to non-Jews and get away with it and whatnot. And yet here we go at the beginning, and we get an encounter with a Jew and a non-Jew, and of course it's the Jew who does the wrong thing, and the Jew who is penalized by a Jewish court for doing a wrong thing to a non-Jew heavily, because it's not allowed. What is your name? So Rav Ada, who's he saw this happening, and he goes up to her and he says, "What is your name?" And she replied, "Matun." And then he responded that this is like a play. It's that's like a play on words. he said to her, Matun, her name plus Matun, the Aramaic word for 200, is worth 400 zuz. So he told a little joke. I'm not sure how funny everyone thinks about it. It's a joke about it's the same joke I made essentially before. It's the joke about, it's like, right?
Brian will get it, it's the dances.
Oh, it's the.
Yeah.
Matun plus Matun is 400 zuz, which is funny because Matun as a woman would get 200 zuz as a ketubah, but also because she was awarded 400 zuz for this court case. It's just a joke. He's just telling a joke. Jokey jokes. Yeah. But
the principle is that.
But the principle is important.
Yeah.
And the justice dispensed here is important because I am told all the time by people on the internet that the Talmud is full of bad things about non-Jews. And it's really not. In fact, there are many, many, many wonderful things it says about how Jews are meant to interact with non-Jews, including that the laws of non-Jewish nations that we live in supersede the laws of the Torah, take precedence, including that the poor of your city, even that are not Jewish, are more deserving of your charity than Jews who live far away, including, I could go on at length with the number of ways that the Talmud expresses that we should live in justice and with peace with our neighbors, no matter who they are or what religion they follow, and that is crucial to Judaism. First of all, I want to thank anyone who's joining us online. If you made it to the end, I'm especially glad you caught our last point. And ignore the stuff from earlier. I'm just a rabbi living in Topeka. You don't need to care about any of the